Okay, so I'm going to take you through making Jammie Dodgers as a biscuits baked item. If we were doing this as an assessed item, this would be fitting into our baked biscuits as one of the groups. Jammie Dodgers are they're quite a well-known brand wise. They're quite good for children's parties because they're nice and bright and colourful. They're really sweet, obviously. They don't have to be too big, so you can make them whatever size you like. Obviously they come in mini form now from the actual brand themselves. We can make them bigger, we can make them different colours depending on what jam we want to use in the middle, so on and so on. There's a couple of different variations that we can do with them, which makes them ideal for a children's party. So to start with, I am going to preheat the oven. I'm going to preheat the oven to 180 or gas mark 4. Obviously we want to preheat the oven before starting it because we want to have the oven at the right temperature by the time the foods are actually going in, so that then they start cooking straight away. I'm then going to get my large bowl out. I need to get some scales as well. I'm going to start by creaming my butter and sugar together first of all now. When you are creaming something together, you're trying to add some air in. We're trying to coat the sugar and butter in themselves to try and trap some air bubbles in the middle, in hopes that our biscuits will be light in texture. So we need 100 grams of butter or margarine. If you're making this at home, you want to make sure that your margarine, whatever it is that you use, has got at least 70 grams per 100 grams of fat in it, which makes it much better for baking. You do get some margarines that have only got 40 grams per 100 grams of fat, and that's not really ideal, it's too much water in it. If you look at the label on the back here, it tells you that fat makes up 70 grams worth of the 100 grams of butter. So 100 grams of butter in there. We're then going to get our sugar. We need 175 grams of that. This is just caster sugar, so just make sure you're not using granulated sugar. Granulated sugar is the sugar that you would have in like your tea and things like that, as we know. It's got much bigger crystals than caster sugar does, and we want them to break down, so we want them to start off quite small. So 175 grams of butter. I'm then going to use my wooden spoon. I'm going to press it up against the side, so we're creaming this together. Press it up against the side and mix all the sugar in together. We should be mixing this until we can't see any of the sugar left, so obviously you can still see quite a lot of the white sugar just now. By the time we're finished creaming this, there should be no white visible. Keep pressing it up against the side, keep moving it round. The more you mix this, the better it's going to be, because the more air is going to get in there, which creates tiny little air bubbles that are then going to make your biscuits nice and light. Okay, nice and light in colour. Get a good mix. That'll do. I'm then going to put my vanilla extract in here, so I'm just going to put a little capful, which is about 2.5 mils, into here, just so it gives it a wee bit of flavour. That's really the only purpose of our vanilla, is giving flavour. It's quite a strong flavour as well, so that's why we only need a tiny little bit of it. Mix that in. You could use an electric whisk at this point, but the reason that we're using a wooden spoon is because we're going to make it into a dough, so when we start putting in the flour we would need to use a wooden spoon anyway. You can't really use an electric whisk for that, because obviously it's going to come into a ball and it will break the electric whisk. I'm going to crack my egg into this smaller bowl just so I can add it a little bit at a time. If there was any shell in there, a good little trick is to use the eggshell, dip it in like so, and then the little bit of eggshell that's in there will stick to this bigger bit, and then you'll be able to bring it out that way. And then I'm going to pop that into the bin. Obviously going to wash my hands now because I've touched raw egg. We need to make sure that we're not going to have any cross-contamination. That's why we wash our hands immediately. Just whisk this egg together just so it's mixed together. And then I'm going to weigh my flour into a little bowl as well, because I'm going to add that a little bit at a time as well. So I'm looking for 200 grams of flour. Obviously it's really important to be measuring accurately. We want to measure accurately, especially when you are baking something, because it's such a fine balance between all the ingredients that you put in, and if you were to have even one ingredient, far too much of it, then it's going to have quite a drastic effect on the product that you're making. You also want to have the exact amounts that are asked for, because it's going to enable us to see how much of the product we're going to be able to make. So for my egg here, I'm going to put in about half of the egg and about half of the flour. It doesn't tell us to sieve this, so we can just put some in. And then we're going to mix that in. I'm going to make sure that I scrape down all the butter and sugar off the side of the bowl so I can involve that in the mixture. Obviously I have went to the trouble of measuring accurately, so I want to make sure that all that mixture is actually included in the final dough. Mix that until you can't see any of the flour. Put the rest of my egg in and I'm going to mix that to the side. I'm going to add my flour a little bit at a time. I might not need all the flour. Obviously it's quite hard to put in just a little bit more egg, so I can always not put in all the flour or add in a wee bit extra flour if needed. I add in some more of my flour and hopefully it should now come into a ball which I will be able to roll out. On the recipe it says that we're going to need 200 grams of flour, which was obviously we've already put in, and then we're also going to need a little bit more flour for dusting, and we're going to roll this out so that we can cut out our biscuit shapes. So we want to make sure that it's not going to stick to the table. Is a little bit wet just now, so it's sticking to the spoon. I couldn't really handle that at the moment, so I'm going to add in a wee bit more flour and keep mixing until it's in a ball. a little bit at a time. If I had put in far too much flour, then I could add in a little bit of milk into this, although there's not any milk in the recipe. Milk's always a good thing to add in to just loosen it off a little bit. Just a wee bit more than that should do us. So the dough is still a little bit sticky, but I'm going to have some flour on the worktop and just knead it a little bit to make it the right consistency. So I'm going to get it all out of the bowl. Again, we went to the trouble of measuring accurately, so I want to make sure that it's all going to come out the bowl and we're going to be able to use all of it. Flour onto the dice just for later, onto the mixture, and then just knead it really lightly. I'd say I'm happy with that consistency just now. I'm going to cut this in half because we need half of the mixture to be whole round biscuits, and then we need the other half to be round biscuits but have a little hole in the middle for the top piece. I'm going to put that to the side just now, keep this on the worktop. Baking tray here that I'm just going to put a little bit of flour on just so that the biscuits don't stick to the bottom. You could also use greaseproof paper to put on your baking tray so they don't stick, just whatever you've got. Okay, so I'm going to start rolling this out. I'm going to make the bottom pieces first. I've spread out my flour all over my desk. I've rolled this into a kind of ball. And I'm going to start rolling out. So when I'm rolling back and forward, really gently, I'm going to move it round. We want this to be about ½ centimetre thick. And we want them to all be the same thickness because then we'll know that they're all going to cook at the same pace. If we had some that were really thin, some that were really thick, the thin ones are going to cook a lot quicker than what the thick ones will. And then we'll have some that are cooked right the way through, some that are raw, some that are potentially burnt. But if we have them all the same thickness, then we'll know that they're all going to be cooked at the same time, hopefully. So my round cutter, this one is about 7 centimetres, let's say. And push that down, bring it straight back up, all the way around, out as many as we can. We'll take off the excess, just keep that to the side. We're going to use that to make some more in a little minute. We can put that back into a bowl and roll it out again. I'm going to carefully use a spatula to pick these up. Could use a palette knife as well. Carefully picking them up. You don't really want to just use your fingers to do this because the chances are you're going to dent that a little bit, and we want them to be as perfectly round as possible. That's just so that they look appealing when they are presented. I'm going to stop there. It looks like there's going to be about 12 that will fit onto my baking tray at once, so I'm going to put that back into the bowl. Cut out another 6, and this time I'm going to do those as the top sections, or the top biscuits, and then we'll have 6 kind of coming out at once, and then I'm going to save that dough for later on. The way that I'm going to store it once I have saved it, or once I've decided that I'm going to save it for later, is I'm going to wrap it up in some cling film nice and tightly, and then I'm going to store it in the fridge until I need it later on. A little bit more flour there, just make sure there's flour on your dough, on the rolling pin, so that nothing's going to be sticking to it. If there is any bits of dough on your rolling pin, you want to take those off, because that dough will stick to the dough that's on your rolling pin. And obviously we don't really want that. So again, rolling to about the same thickness as those ones. We're going to cut out as many as we can, and then we can roll this back up and get some more. So 4, I'm going to take the excess off. That to the side. I'm going to use this. Now, we don't always have to use cutters for things like this. Obviously this is a purpose cutter, but I don't have any that are small enough at home that would be the same size as this, so I'm just going to use this nozzle to cut these out. I'm going to try and have it in the middle as much as possible. Take that out. Around all of them, and then I'm going to use my spatula again to make sure I pick these up and keep their shape. If I used to use my fingers, I might get some kind of dent in them, which we don't want. So carefully, side to side, lifting that onto my spatula, take off any extra bits that we don't want, and then put that onto the baking tray. Now, because we want this to be directly on top of the plain ones, because obviously there's going to be jam in the middle of these, we want to make sure that they're round before they go into the oven. Just making sure that they're all spaced out, they've still got their circle in the middle. And then hopefully this bit of the dough should do another 2, and then they're going to go in the oven, and they're going to be in the oven for about 15 or so minutes, just until they're nice and golden brown. They will still be a little bit soft, so biscuits are always a little bit soft when they come out of the oven, and then they sort of harden up as they cool down. So I've rolled it out again, keeping the same thickness. I'm going to cut 2 circles out on this piece, and then 2 using my nozzle again. And then my spatula, again picking these up, hopefully they're going to keep their shape. If they don't keep their shape, we can reshape them once they're on the baking tray. So that then when they bake, they're going to be the right shape. Okay, so that's us ready. We're going to put these into the oven for 12 minutes actually. I'm going to time that pretty accurately, and that should be them perfectly baked. And then I'll show you what to do afterwards. Okay, so that's them been in for about 10 minutes. And they are looking nice and golden. they should still be a little bit soft on top, which they are. I'm going to just leave them there and let them cool down for about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to use my spatula to take them off and put them on the cooling tray, the wire rack, so that the cold air can get right round them. So that's now been cooling down for a couple of hours now. They're all cool enough that I'll be able to put the jam on now. I'm going to put my jam in a small bowl just to kind of soften it a little bit. Now we don't want to soften it too much because we do want it to kind of hold its shape in between the two layers. I'm going to use probably about half of this, so it'll be about 150 grams roughly of jam. I'm just going to press that, give it a bit of a stir. I'm not going to heat it up or anything like that. Just make sure there's no big lumps in it. I've chosen to do raspberry jam. You could choose really any type of jam really. Sweep it off. I've got a little teaspoon to start spreading it, and a tray here just to put them on. So I'm going to put all the bases on this tray first. Just lay them all out. Obviously these are going to be on the bottom and you're not really going to see these, so ones if you've got a little bit of damage like that, then that's absolutely fine because you're not going to see them. I'm then just going to try and match up tops that I think I might match and just lay them in the same pattern on the cooling tray. And if there's some that have slightly grown a little bit, then we can put bigger ones with those. There we go, and they are ready to put them together. So I'm going to carefully pick them up. Obviously they are a little bit brittle, so they might snap, so you just very carefully, very gently spread all the jam on. So when we're spreading, we want to make sure we've got an even coverage of our biscuit. However, we don't want to get too close to the edge, so we're doing kind of circular motions and just moving it close to the edge but not on the edge, because once we put the lid on, the top biscuit on, sorry, it's going to squeeze down a little bit and it will move out a little bit, so we don't want it all dripping out the side. Obviously the main aim of when you're spreading anything, so when you're spreading like buttercream onto our cakes, you want to get a nice even coverage right throughout the item that you're making, and then the top's going to just get pressed on like that. And then they're going to have it left to set. Now I'm going to do a little bit of icing sugar just on top, just to totally finish them off. So I've just got a sieve, I've got a little teaspoon. I'm just going to lay some icing sugar in there, and then from above really gently just dust it over just to finish them off. And obviously that's going to add a little bit of sweetness, a little bit more sweetness to the dish, but the overall finish will look better. There we go. And that would be them done, so then they could go in an airtight tub for them to be stored. Obviously we need to put them all on the one level because you don't want them to be on top of each other and then squeezing more jam down, so you need to have like a long tub. But as long as they are in an airtight tub, then they should keep for probably about a week. If you're making them for an event, that means they're quite good for making in advance because they're not going to go off, they're not going to go too soft or hard or the wrong texture, we can store them appropriately and have them made a little bit in advance.